Good afternoon, everyone. Our topic for our webinar today is HACCP. Before we get started, let me just tell you that the training on wellness and professional standards will be conducted on November 9th, 2021, so don't miss it. So let's move on to HACCP, which stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. As you know, serving safe food is a critical responsibility for all food service operations. The CDC estimates that each year, 1 in 6 Americans contract a foodborne illness, and that translates to about 48 million people. About 128,000 are hospitalized, and we have about 3,000 deaths each year due to foodborne illness. So I want you to consider the possibilities. This is an actual case that happened in the Findlay School District. The Findlay School District prepared and served a ground beef taco lunch at the Findlay Elementary School. The ground beef that was utilized in the lunch was ground beef supplied by Northern States Beef through the National School Lunch Program. The ground beef was contaminated with E. coli. An investigation by the Washington State Department of Health concluded that contaminated undercooked ground beef in the school lunch tacos was the cause of the outbreak that occurred at the Findlay Elementary School. The health department concluded that since no other common school activity was identified other than eating in the school cafeteria, that it was reasonable to conclude that the meal was likely the source of the illness. Cattle are known reservoirs of E. coli, thus it is likely that consuming a ground beef product that was served in the tacos was the vehicle for the E. coli. A jury agreed with the State Department of Health investigators who concluded that the E. coli infection came from the hamburger meat that had been frozen, then inadequately thawed and cooked for school lunches. Several of the children suffered from hemolytic uremic syndrome and were hospitalized. The 11 victims won a $4.6 million judgment. Most of the award went to a young girl, then just 2 years old, who didn't eat the meal, but was, later infected by one of the older victims. The youngster underwent kidney dialysis and is expected to have lifelong after effects from the E. coli toxins. And I read this just because I think all of us can agree that we don't really want to be the one that is in this situation and how serious it could possibly be. All schools must have a written food safety plan as well as standard operating procedures. Specific hazards are controlled by what we call critical control points. Any potential hazard that you have in your kitchen needs an SOP, standard operating procedure, and CCPs, critical control points. And schools must implement measures to control these hazards. And as we are reviewing online applications and I see some of these HACCP plans that come in and they haven't been reviewed in years, and HACCP plans are supposed to be individualized to the school itself, not just pulled off the internet and a school system put their name on it. But we see that a lot. So I would like to see everyone take this more seriously than we tend to do. I know there's a lot of things on everybody's plate, but this is very important. So the elements of a HACCP plan include documenting menu items in the appropriate HACCP process category, documenting critical control points of food production, monitoring, establishing and documenting corrective action, record keeping, and revising the plan as needed. And one of the things I see a lot of is that I don't see that HACCP plans are reviewed and that the standard operating procedures are signed by a representative of the child nutrition program. The main causes of foodborne illness are time temperature abuse, cross-contamination, and poor personal hygiene. To avoid time temperature abuse, you need to do the following things. You must have procedures to limit the time food spends in the temperature danger zone. And this may mean limiting the amount of food that can be prepared at one time. You need to learn which food items should be checked and monitored, how often and by whom. Assign duties to food handlers in each area and make sure that they understand what to do, how to do it, and why it is important. You need to make sure that they have the tools. Make sure they have the right kind of thermometers. Food handlers should always have their own thermometers, and then have them use timers in prep areas to check how long a food is in the temperature danger zone. Make sure that any and everything about HACCP is recorded. Make sure that the food handlers record the temperatures daily, regularly. Make sure they write down who took the temperatures. Print simple forms for recording the information and make sure you post them next to equipment that needs monitoring. And make sure that food handlers know what to do when time and temperature standards are not met. For example, if soup is on a steam table and it falls below 135 degrees after 2 hours, you have to heat it to the correct temperature. So the corrections show that you've done something. People don't want to put corrections in because it tends to make it, they think, look bad. But what it does is it shows you took action. So you want to make sure that you control the flow of food during the entire time it is in your care. You want to make sure that proper procedures are used and temperatures are monitored and controlled during receiving, storage, thawing, cooking, holding, cooling, and reheating. You want to make sure that you can have documented proof of how your food was handled the entire time it was in your care. So when you receive food, you should make sure that you check the delivery vehicles to make sure they're clean and have proper temperature control. Inspect your food items to make sure they are received at the proper temperature. Check the dates of your perishable foods. Mark the date of arrival. Maintain a receiving log where temperatures have been checked. In storing, you want to make sure that your freezer is kept at 0 degrees or colder. Make sure the floors and the walls are clean and dry. In the refrigerator, you want to make sure the food is kept at 41 degrees or colder. Now, the air temperature should be at least 39 degrees or colder in order to keep the food at 41 degrees or colder. Under dry storage, you must keep the temperature between 50 and 75 degrees. You've all heard of first in, first out, making sure that you ensure proper rotation of food in your storage. Make sure that the oldest food is stored in the front and the newest is in the back. And make sure that expired foods have been discarded. Thawing is a big issue with causing foodborne illness. Improper thawing procedures provide an opportunity for bacteria to grow and possibly produce toxins. Potentially hazardous food must be thawed by one of 4 methods. The best is under refrigeration at 41 degrees or colder. And that may mean taking it out 2 days before you need to prepare it. As a food service director, I always used to have on my production records, after all of the menu items and how many, what quantity, I typed in that what they should take out of the freezer to thaw each day. So under refrigeration at 41 degrees or colder is the optimal way. You can also store it under, thaw it under running water that is 70 degrees or colder. You can thaw it as a part of the cooking process, and you can thaw in the microwave if it will be cooked immediately after thawing. Again, the preferred method is under refrigeration because the food never leaves the danger zone. Menu items should be assigned to one of 3 different processes. This can be done by writing the process number on the recipe or developing a list of menu items in each of the processes. Some menu items may not appear to fit in any one of the procedures. Cold items such as salad bar items, fresh fruits and vegetables should all be treated as process 1. Process 2 is same-day service, where the menu item takes 1 complete trip through the danger zone, going up during cooking, and it's served out. The menu item that's both heated and cooled would become process 3, complex food preparation. So it would take 2 or more complete trips through the danger zone. Hopefully everyone has taught their employees what the temperature danger zone is, 41 degrees to 135 degrees. A critical control point is where a step can be taken to prevent or eliminate or reduce a food safety hazard to an acceptable level. Critical limits are the boundaries of time and or temperature that must be achieved or maintained to control a food safety hazard. When critical limits are not met, the food may be unsafe to consume. You need to make sure, and I would post everywhere in my kitchen, the proper cooking temperature that needs to be written on menus, recipes, and SOPs. As you can see from this chart, poultry and stuffed meat has to be cooked to 165 degrees for at least 15 seconds. Ground meats and injected meats, along with eggs that will be hot held, must be cooked to 155 degrees for 15 seconds. Seafood, steaks, chops, eggs that will be served immediately must be cooked to 145 degrees for 15 seconds. Roast pork, beef, veal, and lamb must be cooked to 145 degrees for at least 4 minutes. Let's make sure we understand what critical control points are. There are 3 different critical control points in this menu item. First is holding of the pasta while the other parts of the recipe is prepared. The temperature of the pasta must be held at 135 degrees or higher. Second is the heating of the chicken and the other ingredients. The chicken must be heated to at least 165 degrees or higher for 15 minutes. Third is the holding of the completed menu item, which must be held at 135 degrees or higher. A critical control point could be added for cooling and reheating. Do your recipes indicate the critical control points? If not, they should be added. As you know, cold foods have to be held at 41 degrees or colder, and hot foods have to be held at 135 degrees or higher. To prevent the growth and multiplication of spore-forming microorganisms, food should be cooked rapidly after cooking. Should be cooled rapidly after cooking. Inadequate cooling can result in spores that can germinate and multiply to hazardous levels. So there are several safe cooling methods. Number one is to place the food in shallow pans or separate into smaller or thinner portions and put in the refrigerator. Use rapid cooling equipment, such as a blast chiller. Place the container of hot food in an ice water bath and stir. Add ice as an ingredient. Stir hot food with a cooling paddle. You should never try to cool anything in anything larger than a 2-inch pan. Remember that all foods and ready-to-eat foods held longer than 24 hours must be labeled and dated. When you're reheating food, you need to make sure that you reheat all potentially hazardous food
Okay, it looks like Babette's internet connection might have failed, so I'm going to step in for a minute until she comes back and then let her take back over. So when reheating food, you should reheat all potentially hazardous food that is cooked and cooled to at least 165 degrees for 15 seconds. You need to reheat potentially hazardous food in a microwave oven for hot holding to at least 165 degrees. And the total time to reheat a food item must not be more than 2 hours. And never use hot holding equipment, such as a steam table, to reheat potentially hazardous food. Babette, are you back? Okay. When transporting food, food containers should be insulated. They should also be able to hold the food at 135 degrees or higher, or at 41 degrees or lower. You only want to use food grade containers. Containers should be designed so that food cannot mix, leak, or spill. At the service site, you need to use appropriate equipment to hold food at the right temperature.
My internet is,
Okay,
you want me
you
to
back?
yeah, my internet is kicking in and out, so.
Feel free to take back over.
In establishing your monitoring procedures, make sure you consider the following questions. How will you monitor your critical control points, and how will you monitor your standard operating procedures? When and how often will you monitor? When and who will be responsible for monitoring? When a critical control limit is not met, you must carry out a corrective action immediately. The corrective action may be simply reheating the food to the required temperature. Other corrective actions may be more complicated, such as rejecting food items that were not delivered at the right temperature, or discarding the food that has been held without temperature control too long. I've seen many more than one time where milk delivered is above 41 degrees. And even if your temperature, even though your milk may be in date, it's going to spoil quicker than the expiration date if it's been held above 41 degrees. Your food safety program must include corrective action. Employees must know what these corrective actions are, and they must be trained in making the right decisions. This preventive approach is the heart of HACCP. Problems will arise, but you need to find them and correct them before they cause illness or injury. It's also important to document those corrective actions when they are taken. Make sure you keep records of your cooking, cooling, and reheating temperatures and other critical control points in the food preparation process. There should be an ongoing as well as a periodic review of the activities described in your food safety program. This step ensures that the food safety program is operating according to what is specified in each school's plan. Designated individuals, such as the manager, should periodically make observations of employees, monitoring activities, calibrate equipment and temperature measuring devices, review your records and the actions taken, and discuss those procedures with employees. All of these activities should take place regularly to verify that the program is addressing the food safety concerns. And if not, check in to see if it needs to be modified or improved. So review and revise your food safety plan at least annually or as often as necessary to reflect any changes in your facility. These may include new equipment, new menu items, reports of illness, or comments on health inspections, or other factors that indicate how well your food safety program is working. Determine who will review the current plan, when it will be done, and how it will be documented. In reviewing the HACCP plans, like I talked about earlier, that have been uploaded to the CMP application, I do see many have not been updated. Many have not been reviewed in years, and many are also not signed. All of your procedures should be reviewed, updated, and signed as frequently as needed. Make sure that you train your employees on how to calibrate a thermometer. I always recommend the ice point method because I think the boiling method tends to cause burns. So make sure you teach them how to do this properly by filling a glass with finely crushed ice, adding clean tap water to the top of the ice, and stir well. Immerse the food thermometer stem a maximum of 2 inches into the mixture, touching neither the sides nor the bottom of the glass. Wait a minimum of 30 seconds before adjusting. For ease in handling, place the stem of the food thermometer through the clip section of the stem sheath and holding the sheath horizontally, lower it into the water. Without removing the stem from the ice, hold the adjusting nut under the head of the thermometer with a suitable tool and turn the head so that the pointer reads 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. And there are many, many YouTube videos that you can use to teach this to your employees. Let's discuss cross-contamination. Cross-contamination can be prevented by separating raw animal foods from ready-to-eat foods. Cross-contamination can occur when raw, unprepared vegetables contact ready-to-eat, potentially hazardous foods. Raw animal foods must also be separated from each other because required cooking temperatures are based on thermal destruction data and anticipated microbial load. These parameters vary with different types of raw animal foods. Food that is inadequately packaged or contained in damaged packaging could become contaminated by microbes, dust, or chemicals introduced by products or equipment. Packaging must be appropriate for preventing the entry of the microorganisms and other contaminants. And these contaminants may be present on the outside of containers and may contaminate food if the packaging is inadequate or damaged, or when the packaging is opened. When handling food, never smoke, chew gum, or eat food. You can drink from a covered container with a straw, but it must be stored on a non-food prep surface. So let's go into a little bit of personal hygiene. Employees with poor personal hygiene can contaminate food or food contact surfaces and cause illness. Foodborne illness can result if employees do any of the following: not washing their hands properly after using the restroom or whenever they become contaminated, coughing or sneezing on food, touching sores, cuts, or boils and then touching the food that they're handling, and coming to work while ill. When customers get sick from food that's contaminated with a virus, it is usually because their food was handled by an employee who has a virus. It could be a person in your operation, an employee of the manufacturer, or anyone else with a virus who handles the food. Keep food handlers that have vomiting, diarrhea, fever, or jaundice from working. Hands are probably the most common way that pathogens are transferred to food. It is important that hand washing be done only at a properly equipped hand washing facility in order to help ensure that food employees effectively clean their hands. Hand washing facilities should be conveniently located, always accessible for hand washing, maintained so that they provide proper water temperature and pressure, and equipped with suitable hand cleaners, nail brushes, and disposable towels, and waste containers or hand dryers. Warm water is more effective than cold water in removing the fatty oils that are encountered in kitchens. An adequate flow of warm water, which must be 100 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter, will cause a soap to lather and aid in flushing soil quickly from your hands. Effective hand washing must include scrubbing, rinsing, and drying the hands. It's also important to avoid recontaminating hands by avoiding direct contact with sink faucets, paper towel dispensers, and restroom door handles after the hand washing procedure. This can be accomplished by obtaining a paper towel from the dispenser and then after hand washing, use the paper towel to operate the hand sink faucet and the restroom door handle. There should never be bare hand contact of ready-to-eat food. Ready-to-eat food includes cooked food, raw fruits and vegetables, baked goods, dried sausages, canned food, snack foods, and beverages. Single-use gloves are important and have become a symbol of food safety, but they can inspire a false sense of security. Using disposable gloves should be an addition, not a substitute for proper hand washing. The FDA Food Code states, except when washing fruits and vegetables, food employees may not contact exposed, ready-to-eat food with their bare hands and shall use suitable utensils such as deli tissues, spatulas, tongs, single-use gloves, or dispensing equipment. It is critical to ensure that employees properly wash their hands before putting on gloves and immediately after removing them. Gloves are meant to prevent bare hand contact with food that will be served to consumers. Many food service employees falsely think that gloves are protecting their own hands. Single-use gloves are to help reduce the spread of disease-causing organisms when used appropriately. It is important for employees to know that single-use gloves can offer additional food protection if placed on washed hands and changed at appropriate times during the food operation. I want to tell you a little story. We evacuated for Hurricane Ida and went to Florida. And at the hotel, there was a little hamburger hut where the prep area was open and I could see the food being prepared. The employee that was grilling hamburgers and chicken first used the same gloves to put the hamburgers and chicken on the grill. And then after grilling the meat, he added the lettuce and tomatoes without washing his hands and changing his gloves. He put his customers at great risk of contracting salmonella food poisoning. Obviously, I became a little unglued and had a conversation with the restaurant manager, and I also contacted the health department to report the issue. We all need to take proper food handling serious. Remember that the longer you wear gloves, the more likely their effectiveness as a barrier will deteriorate. Employees should ideally replace their gloves every 2 hours at a minimum to guard against possible unseen punctures. Always change gloves if the gloves are ripped, torn, contaminated, or if you're changing to a different food task. So you make sure you change your gloves as soon as they become soiled or torn, before beginning a different task, at least every 4 hours during continual use, and more often if necessary, after handling raw meat, seafood, or poultry, and before handling ready-to-eat food. Employees must wash their hands and change their gloves before they begin food preparation, before they begin a new task, after touching any equipment such as refrigerator doors or utensils that have not been cleaned and sanitized, after contacting with chemicals, when interruptions in food preparation occur, such as when answering the telephone or checking in a delivery, handling money, anytime a glove is torn, damaged, or soiled, and anytime contamination of a glove might have occurred. This one was always a big one for me when I was a food service director, and it was always a huge fight with employees. The requirement for fingernails to be trimmed, filed, and maintained is designed to address both the cleanability of the area beneath the fingernails and the possibility that fingernails or pieces of the fingernails may end up in the food due to breakage. Failure to remove fecal material from beneath the fingernails can be a major source of pathogenic organisms. Ragged fingernails present cleanability concerns and may harbor pathogenic organisms. Fingernail polish and artificial fingernails can also be a physical hazard and are not allowed when working in a school food operation. Lesions containing pus that might be on a food employee's hands, as opposed to such wounds on other parts of the body, represent a direct threat for introducing Staphylococcus aureus into food. Consequently, a double barrier is required to cover hand and wrist lesions. Pustular lesions on arms are less concerned when usual food preparation practices are employed, and therefore a single barrier is allowed. However, if the food preparation practices until contact of the exposed portion of the arm with food, a barrier equivalent to that required for your hands and your wrists would be necessary. Any lesion on any other part of your body must be covered, but a bandage is not considered necessary for food safety purposes. Food service workers should be aware that hands and fingernails that contact pustular lesions on other parts of the body or with the mucous membrane of the nose also pose a direct threat for introducing staph into the food. If a food service worker has an infected cut and bandages it, plus puts on a glove, the worker does not have to report the infected cut to the person in charge. However, if the worker does not bandage, its reporting is required. Consumers are particularly sensitive to food contaminated by hair. I know I am. Hair can be both a direct and indirect vehicle of contamination. Food employees may contaminate their hands when they touch their hair. A hair restraint keeps dislodged hair from ending up in the food and may deter employees from touching their hair. Items of jewelry, such as rings, bracelets, and watches, can collect soil, and the construction of the jewelry may hinder routine cleaning. As a result, the jewelry may act as a reservoir for pathogens that can be transmitted through food. The term jewelry refers to the ornaments worn for personal adornment and medical alert bracelets that do not fit into this definition. However, the wearing of those bracelets carries the same potential for transmitting disease-causing organisms to food. So if a food service worker has a medical alert bracelet, the EEOC has agreed that this requirement can be met through reasonable accommodations. An example would be wearing the bracelet high on the arm or secured in a manner that does not pose a risk to the food, but provides emergency medical information if it's needed. An additional hazard associated with jewelry is the possibility that pieces of the item or the whole item itself may fall into the food being prepared. Hard foreign objects in foods may cause medical problems for consumers, such as chipped or broken teeth and internal cuts and lesions. While the food safety requirements prohibit wearing any jewelry on the hands or forearms, except for a plain wedding band, some school districts might prohibit wearing any jewelry, including earrings and necklaces. Dirty clothing can also harbor diseases that are transmittable through food. Food workers who inadvertently touch their dirty clothing may contaminate their hands, and this could result in contamination of the food being prepared. Food may also be contaminated through direct contact with dirty clothing. In addition, employees wearing dirty clothes sends a negative message to consumers about the sanitation of the establishment. When using chemicals, the employee must store chemicals away from food, utensils, and equipment used for food. Make sure you follow the manufacturer's directions and be careful when using chemicals while food is being prepared. And make sure all chemicals are labeled. Let's talk about cleaning and sanitizing. Separation of poisonous and toxic materials in accordance with the requirements of this section ensures that food, equipment, utensils, linens, and single service and single use articles are properly protected from contamination. For example, the storage of these materials directly above or adjacent to food could result in contamination of the food from spillage. You also have chemical sanitizing, and the three most common types of sanitizers are chlorine, iodine, and quaternary ammonium compounds, which are also called quats. You must use a sanitizer kit at your dishwashing sink. And the test kit has to be designed for the sanitizer you are using. That may sound like common sense to you, but I was inspecting a kitchen one time and they were using a chlorine-based chemical sanitizer and they had a quat test kit. So obviously they weren't getting any reading. So make sure that the two match. Know that the concentration decreases with use. So you need to make sure you change your sanitizing water frequently. And many health departments require documentation of the sanitizer in the dish machine as well as the pot and pan sink. When you're using sanitizer, make sure that you must make contact with the object for a specified amount to kill the microorganisms. And you would find that information on the label of the chemical sanitizer itself. When you're using a 3-compartment sink, you must make sure that it's set up properly. The first sink should be to wash. Make sure you pay attention to the temperature requirement on the label of the product. The second sink should be used for rinsing. Some health departments will also allow you not to fill up the rinsing sink, but to use fresh running water. But if you fill the sink, it should be filled with clear, warm water. The third sink is for the sanitizing. And if you're sanitizing with chemicals, pay a particular attention to the temperature requirement, because the temperature that's too high can cause the chemical to become ineffective at sanitizing. Cleaning cloths are a huge source of cross-contamination. Watch in restaurants that you go and eat in, and if they do not have a sanitizing bucket next to the cloth they're cleaning the tables with, all they're doing is spreading all of that bacteria all over the table. You should always use a clean, sanitizing, water-free for grease and debris. Your cloths must be stored in sanitizing water between uses. So I'm taking the dishcloth out of the sanitizing bucket, wringing it out, cleaning the table, and then putting it back into the sanitizer water. Never leave wiping cloths on work tables. They should always be kept inside the sanitizing water. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, but I hope it helps you in training your employees in terms of HACCP. I don't know if we have any questions. I can't see that part. So Courtney, we have no questions. We'll
No
know
question.
that
Yeah, no questions so far.
know that we are always here to help you with any questions that you have concerning HACCP. And you're more than welcome to use our PowerPoint on HACCP to train your employees. And, you know, if you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call. So if nobody has any questions, everyone have a good day and a good week. I hope everybody is recovering from Hurricane Ida and Nicholas. Take care.